All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to what is a very, very, very big episode of the Mike From podcast. It's the first show of a doubleheader. More on that later. If you haven't checked out my previous episodes, please do. It was in episode 107. I chatted with corporate lawyer Richard Cohen, who wrote his first book, The Smooth River, on how he and his wife bravely faced her terminal diagnosis of pancreatic cancer and what we can learn from dealing with crises, not just when it comes to health, but anything in life. He was a very inspiring guy to talk to. So if you haven't checked out that episode in particular, please go do so. In episode 106, we spoke with retired U.S. Customs agent Bob Starkman on what it was like working in Miami during the height of the cocaine cowboys era and some of the more notorious busts that he went on, including about, obviously, of course, his new book, Inside Both Courts, and his friendship with the real Donnie Brasco, Joe Pistone. So episode 108, this is a big one. We've been working on it for a while. I can't believe I got her. She's here. My next guest is certainly one of the more recognizable names in news media, a woman of a definitely an interesting background. She's been involved in the news industry for over 40 years, originally working as a production assistant and then later a reporter, of course, in the Washington, D.C. area and Kansas City as well. Since then, she's gone on to further success, working as a magazine editor for Oprah Winfrey's magazine O, and for almost a decade now, has been one of the lead correspondents and lead anchors on CBS This Morning. I don't need to give her much of an introduction because she doesn't need one. And that's Gayle King, who joins me now on the Mike From podcast. Gayle, welcome. How are you?
Hello, Mike Colón. It's so good to be here. And so I get episode 108. Yay. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for being here. So your childhood is interesting because you were born originally in Chattanooga, but you spent a significant chunk of it in Turkey. Tell us about that.
You know, I always envy people, Mike, who can say, I was born and raised in fill in the blank. Like we had Dave Grohl on this morning of Foo Fighters, he was born in Virginia, lived in Virginia. I love people that have great hometown stories. I have none of that. I was born in Chattanooga, 18 months we were there. Then we were in Washington, D.C. And then from first grade to sixth grade, I lived in Ankara, Turkey. My dad was an electronic engineer, worked for the government. He was sent to Ankara, Turkey. And when you're a kid, you just go where your parents go. You don't think of, oh, what a great experience this is. It's just, we're moving. And so here we go. So I've had a very, how shall we say, eclectic childhood. So elementary school was in Ankara, Turkey. Junior high to high school was California. You probably don't know this Beach Boy song, Wish They All Could Be California Girls. You know that song?
From Rush Hour.
Oh, from Rush Hour. Well, I knew it because it was out when I was in high school. You know it from Rush Hour. That's hilarious. So I remember singing that song in California thinking, I'm a California girl. And then I went to college at University of Maryland. So we were on the East Coast. Then it was off to the races.
Yeah, there's a great scene in Rush Hour 1 where Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker are singing it down the boulevard. So that's where I first heard that song.
That cracks me up. That cracks me up that that's your reference. Your reference is Rush Hour. My reference is playing the actual Beach Boys songs in my bedroom. That's funny.
So growing up for a little bit as you did in Turkey, spending some time over there, given your current career and covering world events, how do you think that early experience shaped you?
Well, I don't know if I was shaped by that, Mike, to tell you the truth. That was just our life. I can remember, for vacations, we would go to Paris and we would go to Greece. And I have very vivid memories of walking in the Acropolis in Greece, saying to my dad, can we just go back to the hotel and go swimming? All we're doing is in the hot sun looking at a bunch of rocks. Well, you and I both know it's so much more than that. Yeah. So I have a greater appreciation for travel. I think travel is so important for children in particular. I think exposure is important. So I guess in that respect, I do have there are some people who've never been out of the country or never been out of their home state. So I do think if you can, travel is a very important thing, just to see that there's a whole big world out there and people live very differently. There's lots of points of views. But I don't know if I was influenced by it because that's just how we lived. And when you come to the States, all you want to do is fit in. I didn't think that it was a big deal that I'd even lived in Turkey, to tell you the truth.
Some people know what they want to do early on in life and their heart is set on that. Other people find it as they go. Did you always know you wanted to work in broadcast media?
Absolutely not. You know what I wanted to do? When I went to University of Maryland, I have such vivid memories of sitting in registration with the the class book where you look at all the classes you could take.
Yep.
And all these papers spread out, trying to think, what am I going to major in? I had no clue when I went, what am I going to major in? I decided on psychology because I've always been a good reader. I've always enjoyed reading and always writing. And I've always liked listening to people's problems and giving unsolicited advice. I think I do that very well, Mike. Got any issues you want to discuss? So I thought that I would either be a child psychologist or I also thought I'd be a very good lawyer. I saw myself in a courtroom arguing my case on behalf of my client. I knew I never wanted to represent criminals, but I thought that it would be, I saw myself in a courtroom. So those were my two tracks. And then, life intervenes. And I got a part-time job at a camera store, which was next to a TV station. And I became acquainted with the people that worked at the TV station. And then I just became hooked. I was offered an entry-level position there. And instead of saying thank you when I was offered the position, I said, well, do I have to work weekends? Note to self, never say that when someone's offering you a gift. The proper response is thank you. And I went into the newsroom for the first time, and Mike, I was hooked. I was fascinated by the news business, and I realized this is what I want to do. So I went to, University of Maryland and wasn't on the journalism track.
We're talking with Gayle King here on the Mike and Maven podcast. I can't believe I'm saying that, but we are. So, starting out, well, first on your psychology degree, because I don't want to just pass over that because that is pretty interesting. Do you feel that's helped? Because you've interviewed a wide, variety of individuals, musicians, artists of different varieties, top politicians, top security officials. Do you feel that psychology degree has played a factor in helping you get the most out of these subjects and understand them better?
No, I don't think I used my psychology degree. You know what I use more than anything is my curiosity and my interest. I've always been the kind of kid that could have a conversation with anybody about anything. When you're younger, you're told that you're nosy. I always hate that word, Mike. I hate the word nosy because it implies that you're just a busybody or you're annoying. And I prefer the word curiosity, or I thought I was a very inquisitive kid. And I think that has been more helpful to me in the job that I have now. I will actually go places and say, I'm not going to say a word. I'm just going to sit here and listen. And then somebody will say something that will make me say, what did you just say? It happened to me yesterday on a plane. These two women were talking, and I just caught the tail end of what they were saying. I go, what movie was that you guys were talking about? They weren't talking to me, but I was so fascinated by what they were talking about. I said, what was that? And they said, it wasn't a movie, it was a show. And I just thought, oh, okay. That's what I mean. It was, most people would sit and not interrupt somebody's conversation or let them even know that you were listening, but I couldn't help it listening. You're in a plane and you're this close to each other. So I think I have a natural curiosity about people and about life. And right. I think that has been most helpful to me.
In Spanish, growing up, I'm half Dominican, half Puerto Rican. We call that in Spanish being presentado, because
what? Say again?
It's called presentado. It's like a Puerto Rican slang term, which means to be, as you just said, nosy and a busybody. And I was that kid because, my thing is, in this show, I do a lot of NYPD and FDNY interviews coming from a family of cops and firefighters. I love that. So anytime I heard a siren, I'm at the window. And I was looking to see what was going on with my grandmother, and Mom would kid me about that. So Mom, when you listen to this interview later, look, if Gayle doesn't think it's nosiness, then hey, that should be a good enough parameter.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that excuse will work with Mom.
We're not nosy. We're not nosy, Mike. We're inquisitive and we're curious. We have a natural curiosity about what is happening in life.
Exactly. So WJZ in Baltimore, it's, some people start off in small places. Baltimore is by no means a small place. There's a lot going on. Still to this day, a lot going on. And you were a production assistant for a while. The thing that's so interesting, you talked earlier just now about sitting somewhere and saying you're not going to say a word.
Yeah.
And, even though sometimes you do chime in, for the most part, it's not what you necessarily learn directly. Obviously, that helps. It's what you can learn indirectly by just sheerly observing someone and how they do their business. So being at WJZ in a newsroom of all these talented individuals, both in front of the camera and behind it, tell me about that experience and the most important lessons that you learned during your time there that still guide you to this day.
Well, listen, people will look at entry-level positions and sometimes poo-poo them.
Mhm.
I look at entry-level positions as a huge opportunity. When I see interns coming in to CBS, I can always tell who has what I call that it factor. There are some people that just come and you can see them looking at their watch, how much longer do I have to be here? And there are other people who go on shoots and they're self-starters, they take their own initiative. They'll say, is there anything I can do? Or how can I help? I always pay attention to those kind of people because I was that kind of kid. And so at WJZ, I would ask, could I go out on stories in addition to my regular job? I was always curious about what other people were working on. How does that work? What are you doing? And I'm still that person. I am still that guy. Even today, if I walk into a place and I'm not quite sure what is happening, I don't mind asking. I don't mind engaging to learn more. I don't mind. So that, but again, I think that starts with the kind of kid that I was.
Absolutely.
Let's just put it this way. I was not a mouse burger, wallflower kind of kid. I'm the one that got the note home from the teacher that said, dear Mr. and Mrs. King, Gayle is a very bright young girl, but she talks a lot in class and tends to be disruptive. Now, that's never the note you want to get home from the teacher, not at my house, because, teachers are treated with great respect, great reverie, great admiration. And the fact that teacher had said that about me, which is something that is clearly preventable, caused major problems for me.
Around this time, I believe is the first time that you met Oprah Winfrey in Baltimore, correct?
Yeah, I met her. That's where we met in Baltimore.
So tell me.
I'm a production assistant,
Mhm.
which is here on the totem pole. She is the anchor, which is here on the totem pole. An audience, I'm showing the up-down position. I'm in the down and she's in the up. But we were both the same age. We were both young Black single women. And we found that we had a lot in common. And so we clicked, because normally the production assistant isn't hanging out with the news anchor in newsroom hierarchy. That's not normally how it goes. But none of that, mattered to Oprah. She just saw me as, a peer, and she saw that, and we became friends. But normally you don't see the anchors hanging out with the production assistants. That's not normally how it works.
And it's kickstarted a friendship that's still going strong to this day. So you trained, of course, Washington, D.C. is not too far away from Baltimore. If you are a follower for the sports fans out there, Masson, for example, they broadcast, for example, both the Washington Nationals and the Baltimore Orioles on the network in proximity. And the Washington Capitals even used to play in Maryland for a little while before they got their arena in Washington.
Exactly right.
So going down there to train as a reporter, I can't think of a better, for as great as New York City is where you currently work, Washington is not a bad place to have a quote unquote crash course in reporting, given all that's going on there, obviously at the federal level with the government being there, but at the local level too. Yeah. So training there, I imagine that had to be an eye opener. And I don't mean to ask the same question again, but much like I asked with being a production assistant, what were some of the more eye opening things that caught your attention and really helped you learn some key lessons while you were training?
But that's why to this day, I love local news. I'm at the network, but I'm telling you, Mike, when there's a breaking story, who you want to hear from? The local news station. Mm-hmm. Because on the national level, it will be reported there was a shooting at a grocery store and 2 people were killed. On the local level, it'll be there's a shooting, fill in the blank, making this up. There's a shooting at Kroger's. It happened in the produce section. The name of the victim is so-and-so and so-and-so. They had come with so-and-so. They will have all the details because it's a community. They'll know. They'll know the name of the police chief. They'll know, the first responders. So that's why I have great respect and admiration for local news, because that's how I grew up. I grew up in local news. So, in Washington, I was accepted to a reporter training program at my old station. So I had that production assistant job in Washington, D.C. I graduate from college. Then you have to get a real job, as you know. I get this entry-level position in Baltimore, WJZ, production assistant. At my old station, they had a reporter training program for a year, and I applied for that. And I'm thinking, well, they know me back there. Surely I'll get it. And I did not get it, which I was shocked because I'd worked with all these people. They knew me. They liked me. I'd been very helpful. They only selected 4. And when I didn't get it, I went to the news director and I said, I walked into his office. He's leaned back in his chair with his feet on his desk, which means you're clearly very relaxed. And I said, hi, Mr. Snyder. I was just wondering why I didn't get the reporter training job. And he said, well, Gayle, and I said, because I really thought I was qualified for it. He said, well, you're certainly qualified. People really like you. We could only choose 4, but you know what? Life ain't fair. And then he said, after he said, Mike, life ain't fair, he goes, anything else? Which is code for this conversation is over. And he's still leaning back in his chair with his feet on his desk. Life ain't fair. You should apply again. Which I did next year and then the following year, and then I got it. But it was such a great lesson to me when he just said, life ain't fair. When you think you deserve something, you have it, you're qualified, people like you, and you can't understand. He goes, I can't even give you a reason, really, because you're certainly qualified. You're like blah, 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 blah. But we just, we chose for other people. You know what? Life ain't fair. And that was a huge wake-up call to me, not to take it personal. And when he said, apply again, I knew I was going to apply again because I really, really wanted this job. That was one great life lesson. Life lesson number 2 for me. So I get the job. My first on-air position on my own, not without my training wheels, is in Kansas City, Missouri. There was breaking news. And I called one of my mentors in Washington. Bruce Johnson is his name. And I said, Bruce, I'm about to go on live, and my furniture didn't come, my clothes didn't come. I'm wearing these same clothes, and I'm about to do a live interview with the police chief, and I'm just trying to figure out the right thing to do. Now I'm expecting him to say, don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. You'll be all right. And instead, what he said to me was, oh, grow up, and hung up the telephone. And I remember, holding the phone like, hello? Did he just hang up the phone? But it was jarring, but it was also very eye-opening because I thought, okay, I got to figure this out. And I did. I bitch slapped myself around and went out there and did the live shot. And from then it was off to the races. Because now you have a job, you can't call people every 2 minutes to say, I don't know what to do. This is so scary. So his grow up was very, very helpful to me, even though it was very abrupt and very hurtful. It turned out to be very, very, very helpful.
It was tough love.
Yeah, it was tough love.
And
I didn't see it as such. But it was definitely that. And he doesn't even remember saying this. He doesn't even remember this conversation. I remember it very vividly. He doesn't remember it. He goes, I would have never spoken that way. I would have never said that. I go, that's exactly what you said to me. He does. So something that was so jarring and upsetting to me, he doesn't even remember.
Man, and that it's one thing to be on your own anywhere, and I'm learning this now, having turned 21. I kid my mom. I'm like, everything that you did, even something as simple as going and handling the groceries, going and handling the household errands. As a kid, you take that for granted. But as an adult, when it's your turn to do these things and take charge, you see just how hard it is. And just how grateful that you should be to somebody to have taken that initiative. So similarly speaking, being on your own.
Mike, I remember when I got my first apartment and I said to my mom, there's no salt and pepper here. And she goes, well, you got to go buy some.
Right.
Or there's no condiments, or where's the laundry? I mean, stuff that you just take for granted, something as simple as salt and pepper. She goes, well, you got to go buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
I go buy it.
Exactly. So that all that to say that being on your own in any position can be a little bit daunting, but being on your own as a reporter in, again, another major market, Kansas City,
where no one. Yeah,
exactly. Kansas City is not small. It may not be New York. It may not be Chicago, but it's not Walla Walla, Washington. It's a pretty big market.
No, it's 26. Listen, there are 212 TV markets in the country. Mm-hmm. And I was very strategic. I engaged in some strategery when I started looking for my first job. They used to have, I don't even know if they have it anymore, but they used to have the broadcasting cable, it wasn't cable, the broadcasting yearbook. And it listed every single station in the country and the markets. So I sat there with that book, and I sat there with the map of the United States, and I would send my tapes out to the top 30 markets. I would say between 20 and 30. I knew I wasn't getting in the top 10. So I didn't send anything to the top 10. I knew I was, but I thought, let me at least try the top 20 to 30 markets. And I knew I wanted to stay as close to the East Coast as possible because I was very tight with my mom. So I wanted to be as close to her as possible. And I looked at stations that had sports teams because sports teams give a market an energy. So whether it's a great college team, or if it's great professional sports. Kansas City had the Royals, they had basketball, they had football. So I was very excited when I applied there.
Of course, here in New York, it's the same thing, of course. And I'm a Yankee fan, so tomorrow night I'm going to die because they're going to play the Red Sox in about 15 years. They're going to be shaved off my life, which I am not looking forward to.
But New York is the #1 TV market in the country.
It is. And the sports teams certainly help that. And obviously now, if you're in Kansas City, the Chiefs are great. So you have a great time with that.
Patrick Mahomes, yes.
Yes. He's an amazing talent. So 1981, you go from Kansas City to my neck of the woods. I'm a lifelong New Haven resident. So I've grown up on WFSB and WTNH as well, the ABC affiliate. And that it's an interesting time. You talk about sports teams. We only had the Whalers. We don't have the Whalers anymore, but that's really all we had. We had UConn too, but UConn wasn't UConn quite yet. I can say this as a lifelong Connecticut resident. It is the pit stop between New York and Boston. So while it may not be New York,
but I never thought of it as a pit stop. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And speaking of Connecticut, that's the only reason why I'm doing this podcast, by the way, is because you're a Connecticut person. I have great affinity for all things Connecticut. And, my career was, I spent 18 years at WFSB. And, when I first got this request, I said, you're not going to want to do this. It's a podcast. It's blah, blah, blah. And then I said, no, I don't want to do that. And she said, yeah, he's in Connecticut. I go, wait. He's in Connecticut where? And let me see something about him again. But that's the only reason that I'm doing this, because I'm telling you, Connecticut is very special to me. I feel that I grew up there. It's the longest I've ever been anywhere. I got married there. I got divorced there. I had my children there. I really started, the major part of my career there. So I'm a big, big, big fan of all things Connecticut. So when they said you were Connecticut, I said, I'm going to do it.
Well, on that note, I can't say anything bad about my home state now. Are we the pit stop? No, we are the greatest state ever.
I never looked at it as a pit stop. I didn't know, I think early on, my dream was to be in a top 10 market. When you start, I thought, well, I'd like to be in a top 10 market, or so I thought. And then, I really became part of the community in the Hartford area and thought, I would be fine. I was married and had children. I would be fine. I got a divorce and then things changed. But I didn't look at it as a pit stop. I wasn't sure what my next move was going to be, nor did I feel it's a pit stop to New York or Boston. I just wanted the experience of working. That's what I wanted.
Quick pause here on the Mike to Name podcast. We'll have more of Gayle King in just a second. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we took a quick, brief pause here in the Mike to Name podcast. We were talking with Gayle King, and Gayle was extolling the wonderful virtues of Connecticut, which apparently got me this interview. So you know what? Yeah. I can't say from now on, I am never going to trash my home state again. We have the best pizza. Obviously, and so any other podcasters out there, if you want, there you go. If you're from Connecticut, hey, you're in. You are.
Yes,
in.
I'm very partial to a 203 and 860 number, Mike.
Yes, you gotta love it. So 18 years in Connecticut, we had a lot going on, and you were working in Hartford. Hartford is never really a quiet city, and really, there's places in Connecticut that are just like that. Bridgeport's never quiet. New Haven certainly never quiet. Right. So, what were some of the more notable stories you can remember from that 18-year span?
Oh my gosh. Well, I haven't been there in however many years. I don't know. I have to really think about that.
You can say pass if you want.
Huh?
You can say pass if you want.
Yeah, I think I will.
That's fine. Well, maybe the Whalers leaving in 97.
I remember the Whalers leaving. I wasn't a big hockey fan, but I do remember the loss people felt for the city because that was our major sports team.
Yeah.
Or one of them, but we still had the Kings and we still had football. But I remember people being very upset. But I wouldn't say that was the one. You know, there had to be. I really don't know.
I didn't mean to stump you.
I've covered so much over the years. I mean, you know, for me, the big Connecticut story that I will always remember is the Newtown Sandy Hook school shooting. And I wasn't even in Connecticut then. But I still deeply felt that story because it was Connecticut and we did cover it here at CBS, of course. But when I think of Connecticut, that's one of the biggest stories that I remember. You know, and there were a couple of, you know, local kidnapping stories that stand out to me, but it's not something that would have made a national story.
No, yeah, that story. That's for me. I was a bit too young for 9/11, so I don't have a vivid recollection of that day. But the three where were you moments in my life that I'll always know for exactly where I was. Newtown's one of them. Another one, I'm not being facetious, is of course when Michael Jackson died. I'll never forget where I was for that. I'll never forget where I was when Kobe died, being a big basketball fan, you know, growing up on him.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget where I was for the Boston Marathon. But Newtown is number one easily on that list. You know, I was in school when it happened. I was in the 6th grade at the time. So I'll definitely never forget.
That was just so shocking.
Yeah, it was.
It was such a shocking story. And 9/11, you know, was a story for all of us. You know, that was a world story. But you know, there were many major stories, you know, in when I was working in local news. But a lot of them have to do with death and destruction.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Around 1998, we're talking with Gayle King here on the Mike to Him podcast. Happy that she's here. I believe that's when you began corresponding for Oprah's magazine. Magazines are a big thing at this point in the 90s, of course. And it's not just the main publications like People and Time, but it's also publications being started up by people of notable celebrity. If you remember, John F. Kennedy Jr. started up George magazine a few years prior in 1995, which because JFK Jr., he was such a arguably the celebrity of the 90s. It took off in popularity for a while. And here's Oprah doing the same thing. Take me through the similarities. So this is a two-pronged question. A, the similarities and differences in running a magazine as opposed to running a news program. And also the idea of magazines at that time. How exciting was it to be a part of an upstart project that had the potential to go very far and obviously has, given the fact that it's still around all these years later?
Yeah, listen, we launched in 2000. And, you know, it's interesting because I'm a TV baby. TV, it really is my first love. So I have a TV job. I have the Oprah magazine, and it's now digital called Oprah Daily. So we do print and digital. And I have a radio show too that I do on Sirius XM. But when you ask me what's my first love, it's hands down television. But it was interesting how the magazine job came about because I was about to re-sign a contract. And Oprah came to me and said, you know, crazy idea. I was talking to the people at Hearst and they're offering this magazine. And they asked me if there's someone who knows me very well who could help them run it. And she said, they suggested you, but I said, listen, she's in television. She would never do this. And I go, I would never do that. So she asked me, you know, can you think of anybody? And I was throwing out names. And I went to bed that night, Mike, and I thought, let me think about this for a second. And I went, well, let's see, I've been here 18 years. Do I want to do this for another 18? I knew that I wanted to stay close to Connecticut because of my children and their father. We were divorced by that time. So I wasn't looking to find a job that would take me out of the Connecticut area. I wanted to figure out a way to stay as close to Connecticut as I could, because that was important to me.
Right.
And I woke up the next morning and go, let's think about that for a second. Maybe I should just go up there and hear what it's about. And when I went to New York and met with the team, I thought, oh, I could actually enjoy this. It's a different skill set. I left television and got into the magazine business. And Oprah and I used to joke about this because she's a TV baby too. We were like Stevie Wonder and Jose Feliciano of the magazine world because we didn't really know it, but it was learning a new business, which was very attractive to me. And I still have a hard time, the difference between magazines and television, you know, the immediacy of television. Sometimes if you have 10 seconds, Mike, that's a lot of time. 10 seconds before you live. That's a lot of time. Magazine world, we work 3 months out, 3 months out. And it was always fascinating to me how we could be a month or two out and say, oh, we can't make that work. We're past the deadline. What do you mean we're past the deadline? We have another month. Nope, with the printing and the this, that never made any sense to me about how you could still have a month left and still not be enough time coming from television where, 10 seconds. I had a thing this morning just going on there, Gayle, we need you 45 seconds. I go, I'll be there. So that still is a big adjustment to me, the timing of it.
You mentioned your children. I mean, having children and juggling a job that is not a conventional job, if news breaks, you're there and people need you to be there to obviously guide them through what it is that's happening. To juggle those two things isn't easy. So what helped you juggle raising your kids, but also doing the best you could as an anchor?
Well, what helped me is that I refused to beat myself up about the things that I couldn't make. They both played Little League, and I'd be sitting in the stands where the game was going on and on and on and on and on, and I knew I had to get back to work. And I can remember being in the 7th inning, and they tied it up, and I went, "Oh God, when is this game going to end?" And they go, "Gayle, don't say that. This is very exciting." I go, "You guys, we've been sitting here for 3 hours. Am I the only one that thinks enough?" Or you go to a school play. I'm all for school plays and Christmas programs, but can the kids sing 2 songs instead of 5? And I'm not kidding. So, I wanted Kirby and Will to know, and this was often the case in my house. I wanted me to be the first thing they saw in the morning and the last thing they saw at night. And I was pretty much able to do that on a pretty consistent business. Did I make every single game? No. And between you and me, I didn't want to. But I was there for all the big moments, and I think that they understood that. But my job was also very important to me. And I think, I think that I'm a better mother because I was very happy in the work that I was doing and I felt very fulfilled. I didn't feel, oh God, I got to see him and take care of the kid. I never thought that because I wanted to be a mother since I was in 7th grade. So I was thrilled to have children and thrilled to all these years later to still have the job that I have. I couldn't have told you that I'd be sitting here at 66 doing this job, but here I am. Favorite daughter Kirby's 35, favorite son Will is 34. They're potty trained and employed. Kirby just had the first baby. I'm over the freaking moon about that. I've been to LA 3 weekends in a row just because I'm so smitten with this genius child, Luca. We're all just over the moon about him. And I still get to do this job. I look at this and go, wow, look at my life. It's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could say otherwise, and definitely.
I mean, think about this for a second. Mike, Walter Cronkite, and I know you know who he is.
Yes.
Had to retire at 65. He had to retire at 65. I'm 66 and I'm still sitting here. Yeah. Wow. There's a great book out by Michael Clinton called Roar, and he's talking about people looking at their next act in life, your 3rd act, 2nd act, whatever it is. He said, you shouldn't think of life as age appropriate. You should think of it as person appropriate. And I think that's so true. I look at it as, I now have adopted that. Yes, it's person appropriate, not age appropriate. Can this person do the job? Is this person good for your organization? Does this person make a difference? And, the stuff you were talking about, balance, life balance, work balance. He says, don't talk about life balance, talk about life brilliance. What can you do to accomplish what you want and be satisfied in all areas of your life? And, listen, knock on wood, the hours are crappy. I never get used to that. But I like what I do so much that I can't even complain about that.
I think the beauty of your job too, and this applies to golf as well, but your job is that it's not one that has a time limit in that, I mentioned being a sports fan. You play a physical sport like football or baseball or basketball. I mentioned I do a lot of NYPD, FDNY interviews. Imagine the grunt work, the physical work that has to be done. If it's rescue work, I mean, that takes a lot out of you to where if you're 50 or if you're even a little bit younger than that, you look at it and says, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And you retire. That's not the case here. It's not to say it isn't a hard job without its hard days and hard things. You just mentioned the hours, and I'm pretty sure there's other things too, the negative stories and things of that nature. But if you want to keep doing it to your 75, to your 80, maybe even beyond that, how long was Barbara Walters on TV for? I
She
mean,
was 80 something.
right. I mean,
80-something.
Diane Sawyer is 75 and just did a terrific special on
I
ABC
know. I love that special.
about the
Yes.
babies of 9/11. So I mean,
Yes.
that's a job. This is a job in which, you can really leave on your own terms. And I think that, that has to
Well,
be something.
Mike, no, you can't leave on your own terms. You can
Never mind.
say
I
as
take it
long
back.
as the boss, yeah, you can't leave on your own terms because listen, it is their sandbox, the powers that be, and they get to decide who plays. And I do think it happens to all of us in this business where you get that call where they say, we think you're so great, you're so fantastic, blah, 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 but we're going to go in a different direction. And I can only hope that if it happens to me, that I won't take it personal if I'm still here and have great appreciation for what I did get to do here. But, so far, so good. I do think I contribute to the network. I love what I do here, but you don't always get to leave on your own terms. Sometimes you can, but you don't always get to leave on your own terms.
Well, hopefully
I hope that will be the case for me. I do. I hope so. I don't know.
A few more things here because I don't want to keep Gayle too long. She's a very busy lady, and I'm glad that she's here. Nice enough to do this. So again, thank you to my home state, and thank you to my mom for making sure that I was born in this state because granted, A, she gave me the gift of life, and B, 21 years later, that helped me get this interview that I'm so happy to have. So shout out to you, Mom. Thank you.
Shout out, Mom. Shout out to Mom.
So
shout out to Samantha. Let me tell you this, Samantha, who brought it to me. Normally, would have just been a no. And I think the only reason she brought it to me was because, it's in Connecticut. So
there you go.
People know I have an affinity for this.
There you go. So you've had your own, you mentioned doing your own radio show on Sirius XM, but you've also had your own version of the television show, the Gayle King Show. It's had different runs and different incarnations.
Yes.
So what's interesting about that is that it breaks from the traditional news program. Not that I'm knocking the traditional news program. For example, CBS This Morning, as we'll touch on a little bit, is great. But
Mike, it's now CBS Mornings. We have to change here.
There you go. It's a slight change. With your own show, sometimes, maybe you can take it in your own direction and cover the kind of stories that you probably wouldn't get to cover in a conventional newscast. So having the Gayle King Show, what were some of the perks of that show being your namesake that you were looking to explore? And I don't mean to try to stump you with this again. I know I did with the Connecticut question earlier. But were there any stories in particular while doing the different versions of the show that stick out?
Well, when the show has your name on it, you certainly feel a great responsibility to it. Mm. You certainly do. You really do feel that it's sort of on your shoulders, even though you have a team that's working with you. It's called the Gayle King Show and you're Gayle King. So you certainly have to take ownership. But there again, I did that show in Connecticut. When they came to me, because I didn't want to give up the news job, because as we know, there's no guarantees. I said, let's see how this goes. Lucky for me, I continue to do my own, I continue to do the news. But, it allowed, in news, you're not allowed to, well, at CBS, I'll just say, because at cable, they want you to have an opinion. When you work for the network, your opinion is not encouraged. In fact, what they want you to do is just report the news, the facts, and only the facts. But I also know that I'm not a robot. We are all human beings here. And sometimes, I can't resist making a comment about something. When you have your own show, you're very much encouraged to share your point of view and to share different perspectives. And I liked being able to do that. You could talk about relationships and money and politics and culture and what makes a relationship work in parenting. So I liked being able to have a point of view and being able to offer an opinion. And you can't do that when you're anchoring the news.
That's the fun part about it too. And there is an old adage that our friend John Miller shared with me when he was on this show, in which he said when he used to work at Fox, that he would walk in and at the very top of the entranceway was a sign, and it was conveniently, it was two sides to the sign. There's two sides to every story. Which one did you get? And I think that that's not to say that in your own show you don't do that. But the beauty of it is, as you said, we're not robots. When we see a story and we're presented these both sides of the story, rather, to use proper English, we come naturally to our own conclusions about it. It's just a natural inclination. And to be able to share that, I imagine, is obviously a very unique thing, because
and let me
it
tell you
encourages
something,
unique
Mike,
conversations.
Well, everybody you see on the air that's anchoring the news has an opinion. Everybody does, because they're not robots, they're human beings. So you just have to be very careful how you present when you have a strong opinion about something. I'm even more, it's not diligent, but I'm even more cautious and more careful about what I say coming out of a story that I know I have a very strong opinion to.
And that, I think, segues into 2011, 2012. You had done some work for Good Morning America. And now, of course, comes the opportunity for what was then CBS This Morning, what is now CBS Mornings, to come into the fold. And this is a news program that I like. I mean, I don't have anything against Today's Show. Today's Show is fine. And Good Morning America is great, too. But it's a little bit of a different format in that, yeah, they'll do the serious stories, but there's also a lot of mixture of lighthearted segments, too, which, again, is totally fine. CBS This Morning and now CBS Mornings is a bit more straightforward. It's a bit of a harder edged news show, which me personally as a viewer, I like a lot because I want to wake up and I want to turn on my television and I want to see, okay, this is what's happening. This is the boots on the ground perspective from correspondent we have here. Here's how it correlates to you. Okay, now I know, and on with the day. So when they announced that they were starting this up, it's had some changes through the years, but you've been a constant on it. What was your idea, even if you don't like the hours, of doing a morning show on a primetime network with such rich history like CBS?
What was my what?
What was your initial perspective when they offered you the opportunity to partake in a show?
Time. Well, it wasn't something I was looking for. So I was sort of surprised, when I get this phone call. And, back then it was CBS This Morning. And they said, we want to reimagine news. There were many times that, Good Morning America, the Today Show, CBS This Morning, were all covering the same thing. But Chris Licht, who is now the EP over at Stephen Colbert, said, he's from Connecticut too, by the way. He's somebody you should reach out to. He had very definite ideas about what he wanted. He said, the news is back. He called it the news is back in the morning. We want to reimagine what morning television looks like. And so there was a bigger commitment, I say, to news. I still think we have that, but I also think with CBS Mornings, with the change, you look at the success of CBS Sunday Morning, which is known for great storytelling. And the thinking now is that we want to continue that through all 7 days of the week. So we pride ourselves on, and I love the phrase, exquisite original reporting and exquisite storytelling. And I think when it comes to storytelling and reporting, I think we are one of the best in the business. And we just intend to continue that. I never want people to think, well, CBS Mornings is harder news edge, which we are, but I don't want people to think we don't have fun here. I don't want people to think, oh, it's the facts and nothing but the facts, because we have Nate Burleson, we have Tony DeCopel, you have me, and the three of us each bring a different sense of humor to what we're covering, to being at the table. So I want people to think you can come and you can have fun and not be a comedy show. Nobody here is trying to be a comedy show, and we can do that.
Right. And by the way, Nate Burleson, love that guy. If you're not over the moon for him already, you're going to be, because he was great on Good Morning Football. Dude is so smart, and you guys are going to love him. He is terrific, man. I love that guy.
And Mike, he's so quick too.
Yeah, he's
a lot of fun. He's a lot of fun,
and yeah, you mentioned, I say this, and this is a bit of a different example because they were kind of in a sense a comedy show, but I grew up as a child of Imus in the Morning. I was having this conversation with somebody else that we know, Mike Lupica, who's been on the show as well. And Mike was a frequent guest in that show. And Imus had his moments where he said lowbrow things, but also he could interview presidents like he did with Bill Clinton. He could interview correspondents. He was
Imus was very smart. He had a very quick, sharp sense of humor, and he was extremely intelligent at what he did.
Yeah, and I love the emotional aspects of CBS This Morning. Like one of the stories that sticks out, and this is just, it was a feature Nora O'Donnell did, chronicling Detective Tina Guerrero, who was one of the few females on the NYPD's emergency service unit. And she's been there a long time. And they're climbing the Brooklyn Bridge, doing the trainings, which they do
I remember that.
To go up there and stop suicidal people from jumping. And as they're doing that, she's talking about what it's like being a counter sniper, what her male colleagues initially thought of her, and how very nearly her past could have changed on 9/11 to where potentially she could have been killed working in Truck 7 in Brooklyn at the time. And just a little story like that, and just the manner that it's told, in that it's not rushed, it's presented in such an exquisite way to where it's not too long, but it's just long enough. I think you guys have really tapped into something tremendous there, to where the viewer not only gets the chance to absorb the story, but they get to chew on it and digest it too.
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, I love that you pointed out Nora, because that's a story I would never do. I'm not climbing a bridge. I'm not getting a plane and a helicopter with the door off. I'm not going to do that. But Nora really does like to go for it. I like my feet firmly planted on the ground at all times, Mike, at all times.
Don't blame you. So, like I said earlier, you've done a lot of notable interviews with a lot of notable individuals. Lengthy sit downs in which you get the chance to really learn about the character of a person, learn about what makes them tick. What are the interviews that stick out to you during your time that you've most enjoyed, or just on a surely conversational level were the most fascinating?
Well, I love, because I've now become friends with some of the parents from Newtown. So I have great admiration and respect for what they've gone through. Those stories will always stick out with me, with the parents. Michelle Obama, when her book Becoming came out, we were one of the people that got to talk to her and her mom together for the first time. Bruce Springsteen, I've liked Bruce Springsteen for a very long time. I begged and groveled him for 5 years before he said, okay. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with a good grovel, Mike, nothing wrong with that. And certainly we're doing something right now with Azriel Clary, who was one of R. Kelly's girlfriends, who I had an interview with her in 2019 where she was very combative and very clearly very irritated with me for asking questions about her relationship with R. Kelly. To fast forward to now 2021, where she ends up testifying against him in a court of law when he's accused of some horrific, horrible, despicable, disgusting things. Now she's testifying against him. So it was interesting to see that woman that I talked to at 21 to who she is now at 23, and her evolution of what was happening to her. I'm very proud of her, actually, more proud of her than I am for myself, to come to the place where she realizes, yes, I am in fact a victim. What I was living through was not love. I'm very excited about the documentary that we just did for Paramount Plus, which I think really gives you a very unique perspective into what was happening in that world, in the R. Kelly world.
I want to, before I get to the last segment, it's been a great conversation. It really hasn't felt like an interview. It's just felt like more of a conversation, which I'm very glad that you've been here, and I hope that you're having a good time. I know I am. And that is, the pandemic, the last year and change now. It started up in March of 2020. Obviously, CBS unfortunately had some cases in the building that caused the building to be shut down for a little while. I mean, hopefully we can begin to turn a corner with this, and cases. The New York Times had an article this morning saying cases were down since September 1st, which is a good sign. But working in this last year and a half of remote broadcast and being weary of your own health, and obviously covering the toll this pandemic has taken, take me through what that's been like from your perspective.
Well, I marvel that we're still doing this. Who would have thought, who would have thought that a year and a half later, we are still talking about COVID and we are still dealing and living with COVID? I didn't think that. I mean, and when you first heard it was going to be shut down, what does that mean? I can remember going to the grocery store, and I called Kirby and Will and said, I just left the grocery store. They go, what are you doing at the grocery store? I said, are you telling me I can't go to the grocery store? And they both said, yes. I mean, I just had no concept of what does that mean? I think none of us did. But here we are. I marvel at what we've all been able to accomplish and what we've all had to deal with. I still don't believe we understand how the toll that this is taking on us. I'm just a plow through person. What do you need to do to get it done? But I think when we all sit down and reflect, we're all going to go, how in the world did we do that? We're running TV shows, we're magazines, we're running businesses, all from our homes. The technology makes that possible, but we've all figured out how to do this. I can't wait for all of this to be over. I hate wearing a mask, but I also know that it's an essential part of your health. It bothers me that getting a vaccine has been so politicized. I'm getting my booster today, and I can't friggin' wait to get the booster. It bothers me that we're pitted against each other about what is really a national health emergency when we have not one, not two, we've got 3 vaccines that have been very effective. So it's been very difficult. I'd like to think that there's light at the end of the tunnel, but I said that last year at this time, and here we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's been tough. It hit close to home for me. My grandfather, great grandfather, he's 84, going to be 85 in November. He's had it twice.
Twice. Wow.
He's had it twice, but then again, that man's indestructible because in his younger years, he did so many dumb things that somehow didn't kill him that I'm like, you know what, you're just gonna live forever. I love that.
Wow. I haven't heard of too many people that have had it twice, Mike.
Yeah, he did. And I asked him.
Something. Did he get the vaccine?
I don't know. He's in a nursing home. And we've been talking with him over FaceTime, and mind you, I vaccinated. I got my Moderna. Shout out Moderna gang. And I haven't been able to see him yet. The rules are a little bit complicated, but I don't know. I do wonder.
I would imagine in a nursing home he had to have gotten it.
I hope so. I mean,
I do too.
So. And I asked him how you feeling when he had it. He's like, I feel fine. I'm like, you tested positive, right? He's like, I did. He's unbelievable. He's unbelievable. I love him. So, Gayle, it's been a great conversation with you. We had a little bit of
Mike, it's very nice to meet you. Very nice
to meet you too.
What do you intend to do with this podcast? Where do you see yourself going? What is your dream job?
Wow, the tables are turning on me. Well, YouTube is such a lucrative thing now. Who would have thought that when YouTube sprouted up in 2005, that it would become this avenue in which you could have so many subscribers and it could be your full-time job. Do I think it'll be my full-time job? No, but I want to get the channel up to at least 1,000 subscribers because from there you can monetize. And I work for a podcast that has 20,000 on YouTube.
And how many subscribers do you have?
I'm at 429.
Okay.
So I'm making my way. But, I look at it, I'm like, I got time. I'll be 22 in 4 months.
500 months to go. All right.
Yeah. And so hopefully I can get there. And if I could monetize my YouTube channel to supplement my income in addition with the job I already have, which is working in podcasting as well as a booker and producer, that'd be great. And the people I've been able to talk to, people like yourself, people like our friend John, the police interviews, the fire interviews, the news interviews, sports as well. I could have never envisioned it. But, for me, the interviews are great. It's the best part about it. But it's also the chase and the hustle that keeps me going because you don't know. I didn't say to myself, I'll never get Gayle King. I say, okay, you know what? Let me send the email anyway. If I don't get her, fine. But as Wayne Gretzky once said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Well, my motto is if you don't ask, you don't get. Right. And so what's the worst somebody can say is no, I can't, or no, I'm not interested. But if you don't ask, you don't get. So I'm very glad you asked.
Well, I'm glad I did too.
All right, Mike.
It is now time for the segment of this podcast that ends it usually, and that is rapid fire, 5 hit and run questions from me and 5 answers from you. Are you ready?
Okay, and then I'm leaving meeting.
Yes, all right. First, funniest story you ever covered?
Dave Chappelle.
Easily, okay. Second, if not for journalism, what other career could you have seen yourself pursuing?
I always wanted to be a singer, but I have a terrible voice. But I thought I'd be a great realtor too. I love looking at houses.
Third, favorite thing to do during your downtime?
Eating at a great restaurant.
There you go. Fourth, favorite restaurant or bar in New York City?
You can't go wrong with anything Jean-Georges.
All right, there you go. Fifth and finally, what advice would you give anybody looking to enter your profession?
Don't take no for an answer for something you really believe in.
All right. And that concludes what's been a great episode of the Mike to New Haven podcast with Gayle King. Gayle, thank you for coming by.
What are you saying? The Mike, what? Say that again.
The Mic'd in New Haven podcast, MIC''D in New Haven. It's a word play on my old sports radio call name of Mike in New Haven. So it's kind of a little play on
I get it. I get what it means, but you say it so fast, I couldn't understand what you were saying. So it's called Mic'd in New Haven.
Mic'd in New Haven, yes. And my YouTube channel is MC's Audio, MC''S Audio.
Okay, Gayle, so say it again.
MC's Audio, MC.
No, I want you to say it the way you normally say it. How do you say it?
The Mic'd in New Haven podcast?
Yeah, but you don't say it that slowly. You go, am I going to, honestly, every time you said it, I was thinking, what is he saying? Because I was thinking his last name is Colón, so it's not Colón. I get the Mike part, but I couldn't understand what you were saying. So
you know what that is? That's the nerves.
No, but it's such a great name to to play off of your own. I would just make sure people know I'm saying, Mike to New Haven. And you go, Mike to New Haven, Mike to New Haven. Honestly, Mike, I didn't know what you were saying.
There you go.
But everybody else knows it. But if I were you, I would make sure people understand what I'm saying. And I didn't want to ask in the middle of it. So I thought I would ask at the end, what is he saying? Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Okay. Leaving meeting.
All right. On behalf of Gayle King, I'm Mike Colón. We will see you next time.